Welcome to the Malahide Modern Railway Museum. This is one of Cyril Fry's models of Great Northern Railway express locomotive which would run on the very line we've just seen. They pulled the Dublin Belfast expresses and they would have come through here through Malahide Station. This locomotive is a 240 from the Midland Great Western Railway, which ran in a roughly triangular geographical area if you take Dublin, Galway and Sligo within that area. The Midland was considered to be the most Irish of all railways, with design features very much unique to our use, not quite so much influence as some of the other companies were by design in Britain. Among the features was this so-called flyaway cam. Not much protection for crews, although it looked quite artistic. These were designed by one Martin Aytock, who was the engineer for time. These 240s were very long-lived. They appeared in 1880, and there were still a couple of examples operating into the early 1960s. In this day and age, we hear a lot about eco-friendly transport and battery-powered vehicles and trains. You see experiments all over the world with the next generation of electric propulsion, with batteries and rechargeable things rather than necessarily just overhead wires. Well, Ireland was way ahead in that day. A good century ago, Dr. James Drum from Dublin patented a type of battery electric multiple unit. This was named after the drum train, D-R-U-M-N, after his name. From the early 1930s, several vehicles were built and they were tried out in Dublin to Bray, two separate commuter lines went from Dublin to Bray. They were a measured success. They were good over a short distance, but the batteries weren't as powerful as they would be nowadays. However, they were perfectly adequate for commuter work. By 1939, in the final development stage, units C and D, which are these two, were built in Inchicore Works in Dublin. The bodywork was designed in the drawing office and closely resembling the Breeden-style carriages that had been introduced in the mid-30s to run on express trains to Cork. But the mechanism and the electrics was the work of Dr. Drum. You can see a pickup here. That was to recharge them at the terminus. There were no overhead wires. They ran purely on batteries. If we look underneath this one, Cyril Fry, the modeler, has actually like with the lids off. Battery technology was not then what it is now. So in the late 1940s, the batteries were worn out and the vehicles were converted to locomotive hauled stock. They went from battery hauled power, which would be in vogue a century later, back to steam operation. You'll notice the photograph of units C and D in the background. The front end doesn't look the same as on the model. And that is because Cyril Fry went to the drawing office as the thing was being planned and designed and built. It had not yet been built, so the only way he could make a model would be by using the plans. He acquired the plans from the chief draftsman who had designed the bodywork, and that was one Henry Beaumont, who just happens to have been my grandfather. And he gave him the plans. Fry went home, he made the models, brought the plans back, and then by the time the actual drum train was built, they had decided to change the front end design. So Fry's model is off plan, whereas the photograph is of the real thing. As you can see now, with the photograph of the real thing, the photograph of the model together, you can see the design differences in the front end. The front end was inspired by the then very modern concept of aeroplanes. And if you think about 1930s aeroplanes, well, you've got the front end of the model pretty much to a T. Many of us who bought train sets in the 1960s will be aware of the synchro smoke concept. Well, this was invented by Cyril Fry and patented and sold to modern railway manufacturers. If we look at this chassis of a County Donegal Railway's 464 tank engine, we can see how it works. With the current pickups, as in all of its models, but in addition, an electrical current is picked up by these wires and passed through a thinner wire inside this chamber. This is the chimney. If you put a drop of oil in there, the little wire inside will heat up the oil and will start smouldering. The smoke will drift up. But the sort of puff, puff, puff action of the smoke coming out, this is what's responsible for that. This piston was connected to the axle here and pushed the piston inside this in and out, which pushed air into the chamber. So in tune with the speed the locomotive was going, air would be pushed into a little chamber and the smoke would come out. So that's where that came from. This is a representation of what Cyril Fry's workbench might have looked like. Some of his models were dinky toys, repainted. In this case, the Great Northern Railway, which painted its road vehicles navy blue. Now that applied to his road vehicles. His models were hand-built. Here we have a locomotive cab for the Great Southern and Western tank engine. That's finished. There isn't a model of this class in his collection, so he must have been planning to build this. With a narrow gauge bogie from the County Donegal Railway, with a spare chassis for a Great Northern Railway S-Class 440. We have all sorts of odds and ends here. He cast his own wheels. This was due to the fact that a lot of his models were made during the 1940s, when the war was on in Britain, and we couldn't obtain things like this from the likes of Beaumont. There were no big mail order firms during the war in Britain. Here we have a chassis of a four-coupled locomotive. I've no idea what it's of. We have a half-built Dublin tram. He fashioned all the seats, just carved out of wood. And he even carved out the staircases for trams out of a solid piece of wood. He was very well organized and meticulous. He kept all his screws and bolts of different sizes in matchboxes with the label off the packet on the end and a little bolt to act as a drawer handle. Very well organized. Criterion safety matches. The station names on his layout were largely made-up names. Churchtown, however, is the district in South Dublin where he lived. He lived in a district called Churchtown. And that is, he had these specially printed. Remember, there were no computer printers. Nowadays, you want to do that, you do it in 2 seconds fast. You key it out in your keyboard, whatever font you've chosen, print it off and stick it to this. No, he had to have that specially printed. Typeset. He made all his own signals as well. Everything here, bar the Dinky Toys lorry, is handmade by Cyril Fry. And so various odds and ends, I've no idea what that is. This is stuff that was found among his papers. Some of the tools he used, like this set of files, they're antiques in their own right. Very high quality for their day. No 3D printing.
Go ahead.
Many of you will have travelled on the May rail tour operated by the Railway Preservation Society of Ireland. Every May up until the COVID lockdowns a few years ago. During those trips, many of you will be familiar with one of the RPSI's preserved locomotives, WT class, or otherwise known as Jeeps, WT class 264 tank engines. that were built in the late 1940s by the LNS for the NCC system in the far north of Ireland. This is the lines north of Belfast. These tank engines, because of their ability to go anywhere and do anything, from shunting to goods trains to express passenger trains, they quickly became nicknamed Jeeps. This is Jeep number 5. Cyril Fry built the model while the production of these was underway. He built this model in 1948. The last of them went into traffic in 1950. As such, apart from the 2 tank engines that the Sligo Leitrim and Northern Counties Railway had in traffic from 1951, these otherwise were the last steam engines delivered for use anywhere in Ireland. The very last 2 of these, one of which is the Preserve number 4, weren't actually officially withdrawn until late 1970 and 1971. This is a model that Cyril Fry did of number 5. Number 5 is interesting in that for a modeller, for a very short time, when the railways in Northern Ireland were nationalised in 1949 and the Ulster Transport Authority was formed, just as British Railways in Britain experimented with different liveries for the corporate image for the new nationalised railways, so did the UTA. But this locomotive appeared for a while in a light green colour, similar to the Aylesford era green in the Isle of Man or London or northeastern agreement in Britain. However, it's depicted here, as they all were when new, in the livery of the NCC, the Northern Counties Committee,